Hello everyone and welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about the midpoint formula. The question that we're going to be able to answer by the end of this lesson is how you can find the location of the midpoint given two endpoints. This right here should be 2, not then. Whoops. Given two midpoints, endpoints. So in our notebook, we're going to be taking a look here at slides 14, 15, 16, and 17. So don't forget to write your essential question and make sure that at the end of the lesson you come back and answer it. So let's first talk about what midpoints are. We've talked about this previously in other lessons, but just as a refresher, a midpoint is in the middle of two other points. And what that means for us is that when I go from one endpoint to the middle, it's going to be the same distance as going from the other endpoint to the middle. So we're going to take a look here at this number line, and the first thing we're going to do is find the midpoint of segment ED. So when we take a look at segment ED, okay, it's simply just this piece going from here to here. And then we have one point in between. Now with segment ED, one cool thing that we can do is split this in half, right? So we know that there's a total of 2 points or 2 spaces in between E and D. Here's 1, here's 2. So if I take 2 and I divide it by 2, because we have 2 points, that would mean that it's in the middle. That gives us a 1. So the middle of these 2 points is going to be 1 space from E or 1 space from D, which is going to be right here at -1. So we're just splitting the difference between the two. Okay, the second question wants us to figure out how we could find the midpoint of segment EB. And instead of doing it the same way here where we counted, they want us to find out a different way to do this. So we have a couple formulas that we can use. We haven't talked about them in this class, but what we're going to do is we're going to use a version of the average formula. So we're going to take the average of the 2 points that we're looking at. So the 2 points that I'm working with here are, again, E and B. E is at -2. B is at +4. So the average formula says that we're going to take E and B, and we're going to add them together, and then we're going to divide it by 2. So in number terms, we have -2 plus 4. That's going to be divided by 2. So -2 plus 4 gives me a +2. And I divide that by 2. And I get an answer of 1. So this is another way that you can figure out what a midpoint is, by using the average formula. This is technically the way that we're going to be doing it from here on out. Instead of counting, the average formula is going to be our best friend here for the next few problems that we're going to take a look at. So again, without counting the spaces, this time they want us to find the midpoint of segment AC. So we could use this exact same formula, except this time we would find AC. So A is -9, and then I add C, which is 7. and we divide it by 2. Negative 9 plus 7 gives me a negative 2. Negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1. So that's how we do midpoints using a number line. This is one-dimensional right here, this number line. What we need to do is we also need to take a look at how to find the midpoints on two-dimensional figures, which is the XY coordinate plane. So this right here is the midpoint formula. We just took a look at it, right? Except when we just took a look at it, it was one-dimensional. So this midpoint formula, I'm going to put here in parentheses that this is the average formula, because we're taking the average of two things, and those two things are points. So when we take the midpoint, we do two separate calculations. That's why you see this comma here. Okay, so these are two separate calculations. This is for the X right here, and then over here, we do the average for the Y values. So what does that look like? Well, first we need to make sure that we understand that when points are listed, they're listed as X comma Y. And these subscripts here, the subscript of 1 and 2, just comes from the two different points. So over here, I'm just going to call this X1, Y1. There's really no reason to why I'm doing it this way. If you wanted to, you could put X1, Y1 over here and X2, Y2 over here. But I like to work from left to right, so X1, Y1, X2, Y2. So this is always how points are going to be listed, X comma Y. It's kind of like alphabetical order. X comes before Y. So when I do my midpoint formula, I'm going to take my X1, which is negative 2. I'm going to add it with my X2, which is positive 5. A negative 2 plus 5 divided by 2. I'm going to use this big M for midpoint. And for the Y values, I have a positive 1 for Y1. I'm going to add 4 for Y2. And that's all divided by 2. So big M is equal to 3 over 2. Negative 2 plus 5 is 3. And 1 plus 4 is 5 divided by 2. So this right here would be our answer. If you wanted to put it into decimal form, this would end up being 1.5 comma 2.5, but we can leave it as a fraction and that's perfectly fine. That's what they did. This is the same work. We just wrote it out. So now this work's already been done for you. So we'll just take a walk through it real quick. Similar process. The only thing that changed here is the fact that the numbers are a little bit different. So here in this problem, the way that it's worked out, we have X1, Y1. And then over here we have X2, Y2. So negative 2 just got replaced here. And then the positive 4 got replaced right here. And then for the Y1, the positive 1 came here, and the positive 3 came here. And then the rest of it is just combining the numbers together and simplifying the fractions. So the last thing that we need to talk about is how to find missing endpoints. Sometimes you'll be asked to find a missing endpoint, and the information that's going to be given to you in the problem is you're going to be given one endpoint, and then you're going to be given a midpoint. So the question is, what is the location of the other endpoint? So this way we have to work backwards. So we know that the average formula, right, is x1 plus x2 over 2 and y1 plus y2 over 2. So this is the average formula. Now, when we're trying to find the missing endpoints, we're going to take each individual piece, and what I mean by that is we're going to take the x's and we're going to set it equal to the midpoint of the x value, or the value of x for the midpoint. So the way that this looks is like this. x1 plus x2 divided by 2 is equal to the midpoint, right? Here's our midpoint. It's going to be equal to 3. I'll go back real quick. We'll call this mx. This is just midpoint of x. And when I plug in my numbers, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do x1. That's what I'm trying to find. And then our first midpoint is at -5. So x1 minus 5 divided by 2 equals the midpoint of x, which is 3. Now to figure out what x1 is, okay, our goal is to figure out what x1 is. The first thing that I need to do is I need to get rid of this 2. So that way I can get x by itself. So I'm going to multiply 2 on both sides, and that cancels it out over here on the left. And then on the right, I have x1 minus 5 equals 6. And we add 5, and our x1 is equal to 11. So that takes care of the x values. Now I'm going to now have to do the same thing for the y values. So I'm going to take this part of the formula, and I'm going to set it equal to the midpoint of the y's. So this is going to be equal to m of y, the midpoint of y. Now, up here, the first endpoint that we know for the y value is 6. So I have y1 plus 6 divided by 2 equals 2, which is the midpoint for the y. Now I do the same thing. I multiply by 2 on both sides. So that way I can get the y by itself. So I have y1 plus 6 equals 4. And then I subtract 6. And I get y1 equals -2. So for my final answer, the missing endpoint, you could just say is 11 comma -2. Make sure that you put your parentheses around it. Circle your answer, and there you go. So we took the average formula, and the average was set equal to the midpoint value, or the average value for the x and for the y. So we did it we did both of those separately. Okay, now stop and jot. This is in your notebook. Okay, the question is how do you find a missing endpoint given the other endpoint and the midpoint? So what we just did, stop and jot and write that into your notebook. We've got some vocabulary words that you would need to use, as well as sentence starters to help you get going. Whoops, I accidentally unshared my screen. So let's get out of this PowerPoint real quick and go to our notebooks. Okay, so mean, median, mode, you can look these up and explain what those are. My question is, which one of these did we use for the midpoint formula? Down here, this example problem, you would complete this one like we did up here on this slide. And then finding missing endpoints, you can type some notes in here about what to do. And then here's the section for your stop and jot. Now, this activity here, this one, you're going to find the midpoints between these 2 points that are listed. So for A, they want you to drag point A to -2, -6. So if I do that, when I drag these, it doesn't place them exactly where you want it to, so you kind of have to play with it a little bit. So there's A, and then B is going to go to +4 and 10. So that's about where B goes. And then C and D would go down here for these two. So the second step that you're going to do is you're going to connect these 2 points together. And the way that they want you to do this is just take your line and connect them together like this. So there we go. And step 3, we're going to find the vertical distance and the horizontal distance. So the vertical distance is called the rise. This goes back to slope of a line. And then the horizontal distance is considered the run. So by doing this, what this allows you to do is it calculates how far apart A and B are. All right, so this is kind of like using the number line. So how far is A from B in the X direction? And how far is A from B in the Y direction? So the way that you would do that, we're going to count the total number of spaces it takes to get from A to B, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I'm counting the spaces up here because we have the hash marks in between. So it's a total of 6. So I need it from A, I need to go to the right 3. So that's 1, 2, 3. Now going up and down, that's going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So half of 16 is 8. So I'm going to go over 3 and then up 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's about 8. Right. Again, it's one of those things it's hard for you to get correct. So it's about right there. It's not at 2. It's close enough. So this would be my midpoint. So you're going to do the same thing down here for this purple one. And all you're doing is you're just finding the average between the 2 points again.